And this, I narrowed this down to about 10 pages. Normally, I never read notes, but I keep notes to keep me on track. And usually I'll walk in here each Sunday with about 2 or 3 pages that I can preach about 45 or 50 minutes. So I narrowed this down to 10. And I got finished on time this morning. You naysayers that said I couldn't do it, I just proved you wrong. Now, I don't know if I'll finish by 12 today because Jaime is so long-winded, and he just took all my time. But I'll get back to this. But with Jaime, he was very kind. So I'm asking you, don't consider this band. Do this, because if we all do not do it, then I'm never going to be comfortable not making sure that you are that someone is listening, or if you have issues or prayer requests, I want to make sure that everybody can get that so they can be praying. And the unique thing about this, according to Jaime, if this doesn't work, this is all on him. For example, the prayer request, you can go and look at that group or that hashtag with prayer requests, and I think it will store all the prayer requests. That's just great. And that's Band app. I know Jaime's a little bit hard to understand for you non-Venezuelan people. But that's Band with a B as in boy. I could get into the ham radio stuff and give you the to give you the alpha version of that, but we'll not do that because a lot of times I forget it, so I just start making up words. But anyway, not to continue to ramble, but this passage, first time I taught this in India, and this portion would have been about a 4 to 6 hour lesson. So obviously we can't do that here. I've shared bits and pieces, especially the part of taking up your cross, but today this one is going to talk about disciple making. And the Lord is given us a parable in John chapter 4. And so if I can just kind of sum up what's being said, and some of it I kind of have to speculate. You have an issue here of the harvest. And the folks that you would think would have a clear perspective of the harvest are oblivious of that there's even a harvest there. Whether they were just so out of touch with the Lord Himself, or they were so involved in the task at hand. And I kind of think it was more of the latter. They were so involved because they were sent to the market and to a city that the Lord's seen, and we'll read the passage in a moment, and the disciples were right in the middle of them and didn't even realize that they were in the middle of a harvest. And the disciples, you would think, would be this group of people that would recognize this and that would know this. But they were not. So we can learn from the disciples to, maybe we've already made this mistake, and we have on some level, but not to continue to make it. Wherever that is in your life, whether it's your family, your kids, the preparation, and I get it. Especially with everything going on, and now, regardless of what you think, I'm quite convinced we've already entered into World War III. At some point in time, it's not going to be a proxy war. We already seen, was it yesterday or the day before, that that the Russians, they pull over or this group, and it was German soldiers. So we're already seeing NATO with some boots on the ground, and all of us kind of suspected that, but regardless, there's just a lot of things going on, and we realized this even from yesterday, and I was so pleased not only the folks from here at the church, how much and where we've taken this over the last 15 plus years, but even the general public is beginning to understand there's a huge problem, and we need to be making sure that we're prepared. In the midst of so much that's going on every level, I don't care if you get bogged down with digital currency, or whatever the case, or what's coming. Let's not fall into the trap. Yesterday I was with the radio guy there, and at the end of my interview, I quoted from Genesis chapter 4, basically where the Lord is asking Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" And Cain responded, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Well, I answer that, and I think the Bible will back this up, is yes, we are our brother's keeper. Now, so I have to take a step back and ask the question, then why are so many Christians not engaged if we truly are our brother's keeper? Fentress County is a very rural county, very poor county. I'm always amazed there can be some type of disaster. It can be someone have a small child that has cancer or whatever. Maybe the family doesn't have insurance, and they'll have a fundraiser. I'm always amazed how much money that they can raise in about 2 or 3 hours from people that have nothing. I've seen them go 2 or 3 hours and walk out of there with $20,000 and $30,000 from people that have nothing. And we're quick to respond when we see there's such a need. I don't know if you've ever watched this TV series called Jericho. It's a few years old. I think there's 1 or 2 series, but anyway, there's about 5 or 6 nuclear bombs that go off, and there's an inner struggle for who's going to control America. And actually, you've got two different groups that are fighting for this, and of course Texas being the good guys, and then you've got the bad guys. But in this town of Jericho, there's a farmer, and his crop of corn is now getting ready to go bad. He's got a portion of his corn that the worms have taken it over. So he's devised a plan, because there's no way, absolutely no way, he can harvest this corn. That's just not going to happen. It's just he and his sister. So he's decided, even though he's never done it or even seen it done, that he's going to take gasoline and he's going to burn off the portion of the corn with the worms to save the rest of the crop. Well, without any strings attached, the town steps in to come and help him harvest the corn. And I began to think about that. And I believe that, generally speaking, especially in the South, this is what you can expect. If we see a need there, yeah, we want to help as much as we possibly can. So if we're not being engaged, and I'm not talking about just the preparedness stuff, but just in any level, if we're not careful, our life consumes around us or maybe our family, and it's because, not that we're bad people, but because we just don't see. We don't have a clear perspective. Or we would be rushing to the masses. Let's go ahead and begin at verse number 35 in John 4. let's look at this parable that Jesus is laying out with the understanding that the disciples had fell into the trap that much of Christianity has fallen into today. We don't see that there's this need. So it starts out, say not ye, there are yet 4 months, and then cometh the harvest. Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest. Now, if I could stop there just for a moment. It's not that they don't believe that there's a harvest. It's not that we don't believe that terrible days are ahead, or most of us believe it. It's not that we don't believe that there's some real issues at hand, but it's hard to believe that it's happening right now. That these things that we can read in the Bible are happening right now. If we're not careful, we'll be like Jesus is describing here. You say, 4 months. He said, no, I tell you that the harvest is now. It's not now. It's not 4 months. And we'll drill into that just a little bit later on. But let's go on. And he that reapeth receive wages and gathereth fruit unto eternal life, that both he that sows and he that reaps may rejoice together. And herein is that saying true, one sows, another reaps. I sent you to reap that whereupon you bestowed no labor. Now, I really feel this could definitely be this society of people today. We need to be reaping the labors that have come before us. That Jesus goes on to say that other men labored, and you are entered in to their labors. Now, my first trip to India, I believe it was, or one of the trips, I was teaching this. So I need to give credit. Now, I wished I could remember the guy's name. I was only with him a couple of days, but he made a huge impact in my life, because I'd never been in a position where I need to teach 4 to 6 hours and then preach at night. So he gave me a lot of his research. So some of this has come from him, and I've just made it fit fit me and fit today. But definitely this is not just something that I thought of, but a great man of God that I actually believe has since passed away, since I never hear anything from him any longer. So when we talk about a harvest, and I have to just skip a lot, and I hope I can make it make sense, even though I have to skip over huge portions of this. The first thing that we have to see is the masses. And this is the hard part. Actually, this may be the hard part. If we don't see the need, now we know, things are going to happen, or we know, people need to hear, but I don't think that we actually see that the harvest is ready. If we did, we would be engaging and reaping. We cannot fall into the trap that the disciples have fallen into. We have to be able to have a clear perception. In other words, that means we have to somehow, and only maybe the Lord can help us, we cannot look at the world through our eyes. We have to be able to look at the world through the eyes of Christ as we see portrayed here. And you say, well, how do you do that? Well, first of all, you start looking at the events going on. Now, if you want to keep up with what's going on, so I'll tell you where not to go. ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, Fox, CNN. Those folks, you just can't. I mean, Tucker Carlson even revealed to us that Fox was not even, he wasn't even allowed to share some of the things. As much as we think Fox is really, really conservative, we see that. And anyone that there's a lot of money being pushed behind it, there's probably some areas they're not going to be allowed to touch. So you've got to find that source that you've learned, and it's just not something you're going to find today, but over the years you've learned that this is a good, reliable source of information. And I will tell you, ham radio is one of those things, because just because they're not journalists on one of these major networks or major news outlets doesn't mean that they don't know what's going on. Listen, in that Queensland, Australia, I knew what was going on there long before it ever hit the news, because I talked to some folks there on the ham radio. So even your 2 meter, there's a way of even reaching around the world, as long as you've got internet coverage, that you can see what's going on and talk to these people. When this Ukraine and Russia thing started, and everyone was afraid all the folks in Europe were going to freeze to death because of this pipeline disruption of oil. Well, I know for me and Dave back here, we were talking to people in Europe almost nightly. And so I'm asking them, is this really happening? He said it is happening, but the reason it's not an issue is this has been one of the lightest winter we've had in a long time. So yeah, thank God for that. But in order to be able to see this, you're going to have to be able to look through the eyes of what Christ can see and what's really out there, not just from our perspective. And we get this from the passage there in the very first verse. We see some, for lack of a better term, maybe some vision words. Actually, I think that's what he called it, if I remember correctly. And because I wrote that down, where he says, lift up your eyes and look on the fields. So he's telling you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields. You have to see what's really out there. And then this word behold, because he says, behold, lift up your eyes and look out on the field. This word behold, especially in the King James, it mostly, if not always, is an alert word. You see the word behold, that means it's calling attention. You need to perk up. You need to pay attention. You need to be ready. We're sounding an alert, an alarm. And so this is what is being said right here, that we need to lift up our heads and look. We've got to see truly what is out there, because I'm telling you guys, and always on some level, there's always a harvest, but I really believe that in these days there is a massive harvest that's out there. And just like the disciples, we have no clue. I know we don't. And I'm not saying everyone, but the mass of Christians, anyway in the Western world, hasn't a clue, or we would be engaged. We're not bad people. We do love God and we love people and we want to help. But if you don't really see that there's help needed, then there's no help offered. And you know, yesterday I got to talk to a lot of folks. I like to try to be at least somewhat familiar with a lot of different things. That way I can enter into many conversations, because several times that conversation is going to lead me to where I really want to go. So yesterday I went from a person that was bit by a dog and telling them what they needed to do, and what, not only medically but even legally, what some of the things they need to look at. I met with some folks that are trying to pull out of the Methodist Church, and they've asked me if I will come and help them on what this process is going to take, and even a VPN. And most of us know what a VPN is. Even setting up a VPN for a widowed lady that had no idea what to do, and I'm a strong believer that for our privacy, that we should have VPNs on our computers and even on our phones. I think it's just a good practice. But with the exception of that lady, because at the same time there was a guy standing over here, and because I can carry a conversation on for a while, and if I'm not interrupted, this conversation will last 30 to 45 minutes. And so finally, Dorothy comes over and said, listen, this guy from radio station's needing to interview you. So I didn't get to go anywhere with her on that because I had to drop it. But I've said all that to say this. We've got to interject into people's lives. We've got to learn how to do this, because this, I am assured of, the harvest is ready. And even if it's not a harvest of souls that is ready, there are many, many Christians today that have no idea that we need to even be setting ourselves up to be more and self-sufficient, or at least that we're only needing the Lord and dependent on the Lord, and not be so dependent upon man. There's just many folks that we can help to see this. As we have been, people have interjected their time into our life. I'm telling you, if people hadn't come and at least planted that seed into my life, not only would I have never been saved, but I would have never seen the falseness of the doctrine that I was following. So not that we're trying to change people, but we at least need to interject something into their life. I'm going by a lot of this, but let me stop here for a moment. I don't want to get into doctrine, whether you're a cessationist, Calvinist, but thankfully I met some Calvin people that really helped me, because the Bible does speak of the elect, but I would never believe it the way that I've always been told what that meant. But he told me, he said, no, really, even the elect, and of course there's no way, and I'm not saying that I follow this doctrine, I'm just saying he really gave me some peace about how they believe. He said, even the elect, we still are mandated to go ye therefore. Because if even the elect, if they are not given the opportunity to respond to the gospel, they will never be saved. And I thought, now, boy, that makes a lot more sense to me. So what I'm saying is, with that thought in mind, even if you believe in the elect or you don't believe in the elect, if we don't engage, there are people going to die and spend eternity in hell. And I'm well versed enough in both the Old and New Testament that bothers me when I start thinking about a watchman. Because the Bible says that as a watchman, and I see these problems coming, I see this evil and I see this sin, and I don't warn the people. If I do not warn the people and then they succumb or die in their iniquities because maybe they didn't see it, the Bible says, your blood will I require. Thy blood I will require. But it also says that if you do warn them, and even if they don't listen and they die in their sin, their iniquity, he said, thy blood I will not require of you. I've had that discussion with some folks that are much more intelligent in the Word of God than I am, and many of us really don't know what to do with that. But I know well enough that I don't want to be faced with finding out the hard way what that means. It's Bible. We have to. So I'm going to make sure to do everything I can to try to see the things, the world, the community, the county, the state, the way that the Lord Himself sees it, and then act appropriately. Because I honestly believe people love God, and if we could see it the way that the Lord sees it, that we would act. We will act appropriately. We won't give excuses. We'll not fall into the trap that because I'm not a Billy Graham or I'm not this and there's no, I'm not going to do great things. Well, I'm here to tell you, those great things are only in your head. I mean, we place these people, we can meet these people and we just think it's great that we've met these people, but I'm this little person and there's nothing I can do. Well, the majority of us are called to be that little person that is still very important. Just because these guys have a platform doesn't mean that they're doing greater work or they need all these accolades that sometimes we give them. Because most of us are called to get up every day, to go to work, whatever that looks like, take care of our family, whether that's a stay-home mom, stay-home dad, whatever it is, and to represent Christ in a worthy manner that He needs to be represented. And we do our part. That's what most of us are called to do. We're not called to do the what we view as the Billy Graham stuff or some of these others. So with that thought in mind, so we must see the masses. We must do our work, because sometimes we back away because I don't know the Bible. I'm too embarrassed. I'm afraid I'm going to make a mistake. We go through a whole list. Satan, if we are not careful, and he has in many of our lives, and if not all of our lives on certain levels, he has absolutely choked the Word of God in our life, that the Word of God is no effect in our life. Because we misunderstand it, or we're afraid that because I can't do the big stuff, that it's not important. Get over that. The next one is seize the moment. Now, no truer statement can be made than this one. And I've said this a couple of times in a sermon before. We're talking about a harvest. Many of us, whether we put a garden out, we understand the concept. And when your garden, when it's time to harvest your tomatoes, you can't say, well, I'll harvest them in December. So if you do, then let me just go ahead and warn you, you're not going to have any tomatoes. Or your corn, you're not going to have any. The point I'm trying to make is the harvest waits for no one. It's on its own timetable and schedule, not yours. That's why we have to seize the moment. We have to. The harvest is ready. That's why Jesus tells us on, and this is the concept that we have with Church of the Harvest and naming the church, is pray to the Lord of the harvest that He will send laborers into His fields, into His harvest. Because the laborers are few. The harvest is great, but there's very few people. So you and I must seize the moment. We cannot, we can't just wait, because the harvest is not waiting. And folks, I'm here to tell you, the harvest, if the harvest is forced to wait, there's many folks in that harvest that's gonna miss heaven. And it might be your family. We can't wait. I'm not going to give you a cookie cutter program that you do this, and this, and that, then you'll cover all the bases. No, God made us unique. I do things the way I do because this is who I am. You're likely never going to do it the way I do it. Because you're not going to, you do not want to invest that kind of time. Well, I like that. I'll stand and talk with someone before I leave. If they'll stand and talk to me, I'll know where they work. I'll know where they go to church. If they've lived here all their life or not. And if they didn't, where did you live? Most of you may never do that because you think you're invading on their privacy. Well, if I'm invading on their privacy, they can just say, okay, I don't want to answer that. And that's fine. But now, let me go ahead and say this, because I never introduce myself as a Christian or a pastor. So let me give you some heads up. You better be a little bit thick-skinned if you do that. Because as Christians, sometimes we just cannot stomach the fact that we might have to hear this terrible language. And if you don't, then you better tell them who you are. Yesterday, there was a guy that had to be listening in on my conversation. And at some point, I did tell them that I was pastor of the church here. So a little bit later on, I went to throw something in the trash, and there was a guy sitting there on one of the benches, and he said, I want to apologize. I said, for what? He said, for the language that I've been using around you. And I said, my friend, these ears have heard a whole lot worse than what I heard out of your mouth today. I don't speak that language. I don't use any curse words at all. I even try not to even use these bywords. Oh my God. I mean, that would have got my mouth mashed as a child, saying stuff like that. So I don't use, and that OMG and Jesus Christ. I mean, I even feel Mom going to smack me now, and she's been dead since 2011, just because I'm just saying it to get to people. I don't use those kinds of words. So yeah, but I realize a lot of the rest of the world does, and not that I want to hear it, but if I choose to go the method that I use, I'm going to have to endure a little bit of that. I get on the plane for a plane ride, and the folks sitting by me, so I'm talking to them, and they order all their alcohol, and they'll ask me, no, I don't want any, and they're telling me all these kind of stuff. Now, if it starts getting very bad, I'll stop and say, I do pastor a church, and when I do, it all changes. The real person that they are changes. Now they become a Christian. And that hinders me in knowing who it is, because I'm trying to decide who this person is and the best way to enter into a conversation that I can at least get their ear when it comes to Christ. So that takes me right to the next point of this. Not only see the masses, seize the moment, but we have to speak the message. Whatever, and maybe not every time you'll get to, but generations past, I remember I grew up in the church, even though I didn't get saved until I was 28, almost 29. But I remember clearly, folks would speak and talk the good talk, but their actions rarely would back up their conversation. It's all about trusting God and all of these things. It's no matter what's happening, you're not stressed out. You don't lose control because you've got this trust in God. And the smallest of things can happen in their life and they just lose it. I've been interviewed this week and that kind of come up, and I said, this is one way parents provoke their kids to wrath. We speak one thing and we do something else. But since then, we went to the other side. We started allowing our actions, and that's a good thing, allowing our actions be our witness, but at some point you have to speak words. Because not everyone may catch on your actions, so you just have to tell them about Christ. You just have to share this. And folks, you figure out your system, because I don't care where you at, what you think, the harvest is ready. We cannot continue not to engage in the harvest. We've got to engage in their life, and we've got to allow them into our life. That doesn't mean that you give them your password to your credit card or your bank account. Even though I've done that before, but I don't advise you to do that. That doesn't mean that you can share intimate things with them that you would only share with maybe your closest of friends or maybe even your spouse. But still, on some level, there has to be some engagement going on. It has to be for you to be able to speak the message. Everybody look at that clock. Now, if Jaime would have narrowed it down 2 minutes, I'd been done at 12. Now, for all you folks who've been coming all these years, or even if you've just been coming for a few months, I'm never done at 12. Ever. Don't expect it twice. We're going to end. I've asked Greg to play something. This is my version. I'm not even going to go there, but it is my version of the, quote, altar call, quote, unquote. Obviously, you can come pray anytime you want. You can come pray now. You can pray at your seat. I really don't care. I don't. I don't think that you have to come up here. If I did, I would preach that till we were all sick of hearing it. I don't fall into rules and regulations that I can't back up in the Bible. But I can back up, we need to pray. And today, because this is what we're preaching today, this is the most important sermon that I'll ever preach, because it's what I'm preaching today. We need to reflect on what's being said. Whether you agree with much of what I had to say or not is beside the point. But do not walk out here without understanding that the harvest is ready. And that the Lord uses you and I. He said, pray ye therefore for laborers. He uses you and I to harvest, to go out and to reap the harvest. Somebody has sown the seed. We can't allow it to just go without someone reaping the benefits of those that have come before us. In my opinion, we've been given the easy job. We can actually offer to help people, whether they take that help or not. This thing we did yesterday, it wasn't for anyone that was there participating. We have those things put together in our life. It was for our community. This is one way our church can give back to the community in which we live. That we can say, yes, I am my brother's keeper, and I'm offering you a way to not be so affected by not what's only coming, but what's already here. I just talked to a farmer that he said a 500-pound calf, he got $1,500 for it. Can you imagine by the time that gets to the grocery store, because that's $3 a pound, he just got paid. Can you imagine what that beef is going to cost when it gets to the grocery store? This thing that we did yesterday, providing all this beef and a little bit of pork, but all this beef, there's a good chance we'll never be able to do that next year. We won't be able to feed that many people at $6 and $7 and $8 a pound that beef is liable to go to. But that's okay. We don't need to fall into the trap. The disciples were gone to the store to buy food, and they were so consumed with the physical bread, they forgot the bread of life. If we can't offer food to them, physical food, that's okay, but we cannot neglect the bread of life. We can't, not any longer. Souls are at stake. So I'm going to ask Greg to take just a few minutes, and that he will play for us, and then we'll dismiss.